I only have 1 month to live. Would you travel with me? Said the millionaire, looking into the eyes of the overweight waitress. The scene seemed straight out of a movie, but it happened right there, in the forgotten corner of a simple diner, where no one would ever expect a life to change forever. Imagine receiving that proposal, leaving everything behind, facing the unknown, and venturing alongside someone who's about to die. It's an invitation that defies logic, fears, and even prejudices. But what if this were the last chapter of your own story? Would you have the courage to say yes? Alexander Harrington had enough money to buy anything, but he couldn't buy what he wanted most: time. The doctor had been clear and cold as a court sentence. 1 month to live. And it's incredible how, when we realize the clock is running out, we start to see the world differently. That morning, he walked into the Bluebird Cafe not in search of luxury, but of a simple moment that would remind him he was still alive. Among worn tables and the aroma of fresh coffee, there was Emily Carter, a young overweight woman who carried in her gaze a mixture of exhaustion and hope. She didn't know it, but that encounter would change everything. Him, a lonely millionaire who never experienced genuine affection. Her, a waitress forgotten by the city's rush. Two opposite worlds that, by fate's design, cross paths in an ordinary instant. And perhaps it's precisely in these common moments that the most moving stories are born. Emily wasn't the type who drew attention in places. Since childhood, she learned to hide behind aprons and trays, listening to cruel comments about her body and living with the feeling of being invisible. But that morning, Alexander saw her in a way no one ever had. It wasn't her weight. It wasn't her simple clothes, not even her hurried manner. He noticed something few managed to see: the silent strength of someone who has faced far more wounds than applause. While she served tables with her usual naturalness, Alexander thought about how ironic it was to discover beauty and truth in such an unlikely place. Who would have thought that, instead of seeking his final days in mansions or resorts, life would lead him to find meaning in the gaze of someone who never had anything? This intrigued him deeply, and he felt he needed to go beyond the casualness of customer and waitress. It was then that, without beating around the bush, Alexander called her over. Emily thought it would be just another complicated order, perhaps a complaint, but what she heard was one of the most unbelievable phrases of her life. "I only have 1 month to live. Would you travel with me?" Her heart almost stopped. She froze, not knowing whether to laugh, cry, or simply drop the tray. Who in their right mind says that to a stranger? But there was so much seriousness in his gaze that the young woman realized it wasn't a joke. Right there, in that instant, the universe seemed to offer her a choice no one would ever dare to imagine. And while Emily tried to understand if this was real, her mind began echoing a disturbing question. What if this was a chance to change everything, even if for a short time? The next step would reveal far more than she imagined. Emily was in shock. That phrase wouldn't leave her head. "I only have 1 month to live. Would you travel with me?" It was so absurd that, for a few seconds, she thought she was being pranked. But the more she looked into Alexander's eyes, the more she perceived the gravity of it. He wasn't a man trying to impress. He was someone carrying on his shoulders the weight of counted time. Emily, for her part, was used to living in silence, hearing whispers about her body, her cheap clothes, her lack of standard. She had gotten used to being rejected both at school and in relationships. And suddenly, there she was, facing a choice that seemed bigger than herself. Accept or refuse. Run away as she always did, or risk a step that could change her entire life. The dilemma was suffocating. After all, how many times would someone like her receive an invitation like this? That same night, while washing the dishes at home and listening to the noise of old pots, Emily remembered her mother's words, said years ago, when her daughter cried from not feeling accepted. "Life's too short not to take risks, sweetheart." Those words echoed stronger than ever. Maybe it was destiny. Maybe it was madness. But she realized that if she refused, she'd spend the rest of her life imagining what if, and living with what if was an even worse prison than the loneliness she already faced every day. It wasn't just a trip. It was an opportunity to prove to herself that she had value, that she could be chosen not for appearance, but for essence. And when she remembered the sincerity in Alexander's eyes, Something inside her whispered that there was more truth in that proposal than in any promise she'd heard before. Determined, even with her heart racing in confused thoughts, Emily returned to the cafe the next day. She found Alexander sitting in the same spot, waiting for her with a serene look, as if he already knew what her answer would be. Unable to hold back her nervousness, she took a deep breath and said, "I'll go." It was simple, but loaded with courage. Alexander smiled, and in that smile there was gratitude, relief, and a hint of joy, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Emily still didn't know what awaited her, but she was fully aware she was entering unknown territory. Accepting that proposal wasn't just embarking on a trip around the world. It was diving into an inner journey, where she'd have to face fears, judgments, and perhaps even rediscover herself. But something inside her said this was the right choice. After all, some real stories only happen when we allow ourselves to live the improbable. Emily's yes didn't come empty, and she knew she needed to protect herself. Life had already taught her, the hard way, that trusting blindly could be costly. So, facing Alexander, she took a deep breath and decided to set conditions. It wasn't recklessness without reason. It was a need of someone who had gone through deprivation and was learning, the hard way, to value each step taken. Emily, with slightly trembling hands, looked into his eyes and said she wouldn't embark on any trip without making her terms clear. Alexander, who had always been in control of million-dollar negotiations, fell silent, watching that simple waitress show firmness like few executives had shown before him. It was curious. He, used to being the one with the final word, now found himself listening attentively, almost like an apprentice before an unexpected master. And in that instant, he realized something different. Emily didn't accept being led by the glitter of wealth. She wanted to be there for the right reasons. The rules emerged one by one, like bricks establishing the foundation of what was to come. The first, Emily wanted to know the complete truth about Alexander's life. Not just the success stories, but also the falls, the fears, the loneliness he carried. The second, she'd insist on paying for her own meals, even if it was just a coffee or a simple dish, because she didn't want to feel like she was there as someone bought. The third, if the illness advanced to the point of making him unable to continue, she'd return to the United States, respecting his life and limits. These conditions for anyone might sound harsh or even unnecessary, but Alexander received them like someone hearing music after years of silence. After all, for the first time, someone was putting authenticity above money. And that gesture, coming precisely from a woman so often invisible, was what touched him most. Alexander smiled, but it wasn't a superficial smile, one of those that hide behind conventions. It was a smile full of admiration, like someone recognizing a rare strength. Emily, so often rejected for being overweight, showed her something that didn't fit any standard. Courage. And courage, he knew, is the most expensive jewel a human being can offer. By accepting conditions, Alexander realized that this trip was no longer a simple whim of his final days, and was becoming a real pact between two worlds that should never have crossed. Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was no longer afraid of being mistaken for a gold digger, because her rules had shielded her dignity. From there on, both were free to live without masks. And it was in this climate of unlikely agreement that the first stop began to take shape. Paris, the city of lights, awaited them. The plane landed in Paris on a gray morning. But for Emily, everything seemed golden, as if the sky had been painted especially for her. She'd never left the United States, and now she walked side by side with a millionaire who had only 1 month to live. Her heart beat fast, divided between excitement and fear. Alexander, who already knew the city on every corner, looked at her with enchantment. It wasn't the Eiffel Tower that fascinated him, nor the Louvre, not even the Seine reflecting the city lights. It was Emily, the way she opened her eyes to every detail, as if she were a child discovering the world for the first time. He realized he'd gotten used to passing through places without feeling anything, and now, through her, he was relearning to see. It's curious how sometimes we need someone simple to remind us of the grandeur of the most basic things. They walked along the Seine, watching the street artists, the sellers of old books, and the reflection of the illuminated bridges. Emily got emotional with each gesture, each sound, each color. She didn't just see buildings or monuments. She saw stories hidden in every stone. Alexander, for his part, remained silent, absorbing that sensitive gaze that transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary. When they arrived at the Louvre, Emily wasn't just impressed by the Mona Lisa, but by the tourists who waited hours for a single look and commented that this revealed the hunger we all have for meaning. Alexander had never thought that way. For him, artworks were investments, but now he was beginning to see feelings in them. With each phrase from Emily, he found himself reflecting on his own life, realizing he'd never really lived. And it's exactly there that the unexpected began to happen. Alexander felt alive again. At the Eiffel Tower, when they reached the top, the cold wind cut their faces, but the warmth of the experience surpassed any discomfort. Emily, with teary eyes, said softly, "It's incredible to think that I, who so many times felt small, can now see the world from above." Alexander held her hand without thinking, just reacting to the moment. And in that touch, there was something that couldn't be explained in words. It wasn't just physical attraction or the dazzlement of the moment. It was a feeling that two wounded souls had found each other to heal. Alexander realized it wasn't him offering something to Emily, but her giving him the most precious gift, a new way of seeing life. And as they watched Paris at their feet, a silent bond grew. But what would come in Barcelona would be even deeper. Barcelona welcomed Alexander and Emily with an open sky and streets that breathed art. For Emily, every corner seemed like a living scene, full of colors and stories that mixed with the sound of voices and guitars from local artists. They walked down Las Ramblas, tasted tapas in old taverns, and got lost in the alleys that held the city's essence. But this time, it wasn't just the buildings or monuments that drew attention. Emily felt that place was inviting her to speak, to open her heart in a way she hadn't in Paris. Maybe it was a Spanish warmth. Maybe it was a growing trust beside Alexander. But inside her, there was an old knot asking to be untied. He, attentive, noticed that the brightness in her eyes had a pain, and understood that this journey wouldn't just be about external discoveries, but mainly internal ones. On a quiet night, sitting in front of the illuminated Sagrada Familia, Emily took a deep breath and let the words out. She told Alexander about a life marked by discrimination, about the looks that hurt her more than any words. She said that being overweight had become a kind of social sentence, as if no one were capable of seeing beyond the body. She shared memories from school, when she was a target of cruel jokes, and from jobs where she always stayed backstage, as if she didn't deserve to be seen. Alexander listened in silence, without interrupting. With each sentence, he felt the weight of a reality money never allowed him to experience. He had faced loneliness, but never rejection. And in that contrast, a bridge began to form. Emily wasn't just talking about herself. She was talking about millions of invisible people, excluded and forgotten for not fitting standards. Alexander, touched by her vulnerability, also decided to open up. He told her that, although he had wealth, he always carried an immense emptiness. Friends interested only in business, women attracted by luxury, and a life where even hugs seemed bought. He confessed that many times he felt like a stranger inside his own home, surrounded by everything and at the same time by nothing. Emily listened attentively, seeing in him not the millionaire, but a man broken by loneliness. And it was at that moment that the connection between the two deepened in an irreversible way. They were no longer just travelers on an unlikely adventure. They were two souls who recognized each other in pain. The mutual trust created a safe space where there were no judgments. And suddenly, that night in Barcelona wasn't marked by the grandiose architecture, but by the beginning of a love that was starting to be born in silence. Rome presented itself before them like an ancient book, full of stories kept in the stones and narrow streets. Emily walked attentively, absorbing every detail, while Alexander observed each gesture of hers, as if trying to record that image forever. The Colosseum received them with its grandiose silence, reminding them that time spares no one. Emily felt the weight of history and, at the same time, the lightness of being alive in that moment. They threw coins in the Trevi fountain, laughing at small coincidences, but also getting emotional with the magic of the place. Alexander seemed increasingly contained, as if holding something inside his chest that needed to come out. He held Emily's hand, feeling her silent strength, which she'd never noticed in herself. The wind blowing through the squares seemed to bring whispers from the past, reminding them that time is precious. Emily noticed that each city transformed them, but Rome had something special, as if asking for more intimacy. They walked through Trastevere, talking about trivialities, but feeling that each word carried depth. Alexander finally took a deep breath, preparing to reveal what he'd been keeping since the cafe. Emily felt her heart race, not knowing if it was anxiety or fear of what was coming. She realized the city seemed to approve that moment, silent and eternal, as a witness to what was about to happen. And in that instant, Rome's air mixed with the expectation of truth that would change everything between them. The connection created since Paris and Barcelona reached a decisive point about to transform lives. Alexander looked deep into Emily's eyes and, with a trembling voice, began to reveal his secret. He told her he fell in love with her since the cafe, not for her appearance, but for the strength and tenderness she carried. He said that, although he was a millionaire, he'd never felt something so genuine for anyone before. Emily was speechless, absorbing each syllable, each nuance of emotion present in his words. He explained that the diagnosis was still serious, but that he needed to be honest about his feelings now. He told her that each day by her side had been a gift more valuable than any fortune. Emily felt tears roll down, but smiled, understanding she was facing something she never imagined experiencing. It was an unexpected love, intense, that arose at the right time in the right place. Even though life was short, Alexander continued, confessing fears and insecurities, but also the hope that each instant would be eternal. Emily held his hand, feeling that silent strength, which she'd always judged weak, was now guiding her. She admitted feeling the same, recognizing that love can arise where least expected. They stayed there in the heart of Rome, embraced, feeling the world around them disappear. The eternal city watched them in silence, as if it knew that love couldn't be interrupted. Each moment was precious. Each shared breath became eternal memory. And so, the revelation transformed not only feelings, but also the way they saw life in the remaining time. Emily realized that being with Alexander wasn't just a trip, but a learning experience about courage and intensity. He, in turn, discovered that true wealth was in human bonds, in sincerity and in affection. Rome wasn't just a backdrop. It was a witness to a love that refused to be superficial. They walked through the illuminated squares, each gesture carrying meaning and each look transmitting trust. Emily felt valued in a way she'd never experienced before, and Alexander allowed himself to feel genuine love. The city, with its millenary history, seemed to bless that unlikely and intense encounter. They talked about dreams, fears, and lost moments, sharing experiences that reinforced connection between them. Emily noticed that even the fear of loss didn't diminish the strength of what they felt. On the contrary, it made everything more valuable. Alexander smiled when noticing that each gesture of hers reflected a rare authenticity, capable of transforming any hardened heart. She felt understood, accepted, and loved, something her entire life seemed to deny. They continued walking until nightfall, with Rome's lights reflecting in both their eyes like stars. The silent love grew, making each instant deeper and more memorable, even facing the awareness of time's brevity. And while the night enveloped the eternal city, something whispered that this connection would forever change the way each would live their days. Emily and Alexander prepared for the next destination, aware that love's intensity isn't measured in months, but in moments. And so, Rome not only revealed secrets, but also paved the way for a love that transcended any limit or expectation. Santorini emerged before them like a dream painted in shades of blue and white, a place that seemed suspended between sky and sea. Emily was breathless seeing the little houses aligned on the cliffs, reflecting the golden light of the sunset. Each narrow street seemed to hide ancient secrets and forgotten love stories. Alexander guided her, observing each reaction of hers, fascinated by the sensitivity she had before the world. They walked hand in hand, laughing and talking about everything and nothing, as if time had no limits. Emily felt that each instant there was more intense than any previous experience. It was the peak of an adventure, that began with an unlikely encounter at the Bluebird Cafe and now transformed into pure magic. The aroma of the sea mixed with the smell of flowers and typical foods seemed to create a perfect setting for love. Alexander, looking at her, noticed that each smile from Emily carried a strength he never imagined existed. And even knowing his days were numbered, he wanted each moment to be lived with absolute fullness. Emily, for her part, understood that life's intensity isn't measured in quantity of days, but in the depth of feelings. They explored small villages, got lost on white stairways, and stopped at viewpoints that gave a view of the Aegean's infinity. Each sunset was celebrated with silence, just absorbing the beauty and the closeness of who they loved. And in that surreal setting, both began to understand that the true gift wasn't a destination, but each other's company. Santorini became the stage for an experience that would be recorded in their memory forever, even though time was short. During the days that followed, they surrendered to small adventures and big conversations, each moment deeper than the previous one. Alexander asked Emily to continue traveling and living for both of them, as if each step of hers were an extension of his own life. She moved, accepted, understanding that true love isn't just enjoying, but also carrying the other's legacy forward. They visited beaches with crystal clear waters, took boat rides at sunset, and discovered hidden restaurants that seemed created just for them. Emily shared laughter and confidences, revealing even more her soul and experiences, including the pain of being discriminated against for being overweight. Alexander, in return, told stories of loneliness, memories of a life full of luxury, but empty of affection. The complicity grew, and each small gesture, like holding hands or sharing a look, had the intensity of an eternal moment. They laughed, cried, and got emotional, aware that each day could be the last. Santorini's beauty intensified each sensation, and Emily felt she'd never lived something so intense before. Alexander, for his part, marveled at her ability to see the extraordinary in the simple, something he'd never learned alone. And there, among vibrant colors, gentle winds, and the sound of the sea, their love reached its peak, full, intense, and true. Each night ended with long embraces and silent conversations, where words were unnecessary before what they felt. Emily began to realize that this journey wasn't just a farewell, but also a learning experience about living without fear. Alexander felt that the remaining time was transforming into memories that would last far beyond his existence. And as the days passed, they knew goodbye was approaching, but each instant that was so precious they tried to freeze it in memory. On the last sunset they shared, Alexander held Emily in his arms and said words that would never be forgotten. He confessed his eternal love, saying that, even after his departure, she would carry with her every feeling lived by his side. Emily cried silently, feeling a mixture of pain and gratitude, understanding that this love had transformed her life. The gentle wind moved her hair, and the sea reflected the golden light, as if also celebrating that moment. He smiled with peace in his eyes, as if he could finally rest knowing he'd loved and been truly loved. Emily felt her heart tighten, but also strengthen, because she understood that the intensity of their love wasn't measured in time. Alexander closed his eyes and was gone, leaving Emily with memories, teachings, and a legacy of courage and love. She stayed there in silence, absorbing every detail, every smell, every sensation of that place and that instant. And even facing the loss, Emily knew she received the most precious gift, a love that recognized her, valued her, and transformed her. Santorini's beauty mixed with the pain of farewell, creating an eternal memory impossible to be erased. She took a deep breath, feeling she needed to honor that love by living fully, without regrets. The farewell was silent, but loaded with meaning, teaching that each instant of life is unique and precious. Emily understood that true love is capable of transcending time, transforming pain into strength. And as the sun disappeared on the horizon, she promised herself she'd continue the journey, carrying Alexander in each step she took. Santorini, witness to the peak in the farewell, was recorded in memory as a place where love and life intertwined forever. The sunset in Santorini painted the sky orange and pink, creating an almost magical atmosphere, but loaded with sadness. Emily held Alexander in her arms, feeling the weight of the reality that was approaching. He looked at her with a serene smile, as if already at peace with his destiny. The silence between them was profound, but full of meanings. They didn't need words to understand each other. Emily felt each beat of his heart, knowing that each instant was precious and irretrievable. Alexander, struggling to breathe, caressed her face, transmitting love in each touch. He said he'd never regret anything, that each second by her side had been more valuable than any fortune. Emily felt tears roll silently, mixed with smiles, because she understood that this love transcended time. The gentle wind moved her hair, and the sound of the waves created a perfect soundtrack for the farewell. She held his hand firmly, as if she could prevent the inevitable, but knew that true love is liberating. Alexander murmured words of gratitude, asking Emily to continue living intensely. She promised she'd honor each moment, each memory, and each teaching he was leaving. The sky darkened, and the sun's light reflected in Emily's eyes as a reminder of his presence. And, in that instant, the world seemed to stop, witnessing a farewell that was, at the same time, painful and sacred. Emily realized she'd never forget that touch, that look, and the feeling of being deeply loved. Alexander took a deep breath one last time, with a sigh that seemed to carry all of life's lightness and intensity. His eyes closed, and Emily felt profound silence invade the place, but also an intense peace. It was a feeling of someone who fulfilled their mission, to love and be loved without reserves, without conditions, just with truth. She remained there, embracing his body, feeling his presence even after the last breath. Each detail of that moment was recorded in memory. The wind, the smell of the sea, the golden light, and the warmth of the embrace. Emily understood that their love didn't end there. It remained alive in her memories and future actions. Her heart ached, but was also strengthened because she understood that living meant carrying the legacy of those we love. She took a deep breath, feeling the sea breeze envelop her body and soul, as if Alexander were still there. The silence of night fell over Santorini, but it wasn't empty. It was full of untold stories and eternalized feelings. Emily felt she'd learned something profound. Life is brief, but true love transforms everything. She looked toward the horizon and promised herself she wouldn't waste any instant, that she'd live for both of them. The physical goodbye had happened, but Alexander's presence would continue guiding each of Emily's steps. She left the embrace, but kept the memory alive, carrying his warmth in her heart and the strength of love in each gesture. And while the waves hit the cliffs, Emily felt that this love would be eternal, even facing death. Santorini witnessed not just a farewell, but the birth of a legacy that would live through her forever. That same night, Emily walked alone to the illuminated streets, reflecting on everything she'd lived. Each moment with Alexander now seemed like a treasure, kept in her heart forever. She realized that this unexpected love had changed her way of seeing the world and herself. The streets, before just beautiful landscapes, now seemed to carry living memories of laughter, embraces, and confidences. Emily realized that life was fragile, and that each second needed to be appreciated with intensity. The goodbye wasn't the end, but a starting point for a new phase, where she'd carry each teaching and feeling. She felt grateful for having had the courage to accept the improbable, to surrender without fear, and trust in love. The city lights reflected in her eyes as a reminder of each instant lived by his side. Emily knew that each decision made during the trip had meaning, transforming pain into learning. And, even facing sadness, she felt strength to continue, inspired by the love she'd received. The city seemed to embrace her, witnessing the growth that arises from loss and from the intensity of the lived experience. She walked to a viewpoint, looking toward the sea that seemed infinite, feeling his presence in each wave. Emily understood that true love isn't measured by time, but by the depth of the connection. And that night in Santorini, she promised that each future step would be guided by what she learned beside Alexander. The final farewell wasn't just pain, but also a seed of transformation, strength, and courage to live fully. Back in the United States, Emily entered her house still with the sensation of Santorini floating in the air. Each object, each smell, seemed to bring living memories of Alexander and the intensity of the days they spent together. She opened the mail and found a handwritten letter with his delicate handwriting. Her heart raced, recognizing the way he managed to transmit feelings just through words. In the letter, Alexander asked her to continue living fully, not to let fear or pain limit her steps. There were also instructions about a small inheritance, enough for Emily to achieve dreams that always seemed impossible. She felt a mixture of emotion, gratitude, and responsibility. Each phrase in the letter carried love, care, and trust, as if he were still present by her side. Emily realized that, even after departure, Alexander had left a way to continue caring for her. The legacy wasn't just financial, but above all emotional. Courage, self-love, and the certainty that she deserved happiness. She read and reread the letter, absorbing each word, each teaching, each memory he carefully left. The sensation was that he transformed her life definitively, opening doors to opportunities and dreams that before seemed unreachable. Emily understood that, even in physical absence, the impact of genuine love could last forever. And in that moment, she realized her mission now was to honor Alexander by living, loving, and helping others who, like her, had been rejected. Her heart filled with strength and hope, ready to transform the legacy into action. Emily decided to visit people who, like her, had been marginalized, rejected, or ignored by society. Each gesture of help, each word of encouragement, was as if she were sharing a piece of Alexander's love. She felt that each smile drawn, each opportunity created, strengthened what he'd left as a gift. The young, overweight woman who once felt invisible now became a source of inspiration and transformation. She began to realize how small actions could generate enormous impacts in the life of someone who feels rejected. Alexander's legacy was transforming into movement, love, empathy, and inclusion, transmitted concretely. Emily found strength in the pain of loss and decided she wouldn't keep that just to herself. Each decision of hers reflected the values he'd left: authenticity, courage, and generosity. She realized that, by sharing opportunities, she was perpetuating something bigger than both could imagine. Alexander's letter became not just a memory, but a guide for each choice Emily would make from then on. Their love, even physically interrupted, continued alive through actions, memories, and inspirations. She felt that true wealth was exactly in that, in the impact one leaves on the world and on people. Emily knew that, although he departed, he planted seeds that would flourish forever. And so, each gesture of hers became an extension of Alexander, a reflection of a love that didn't die with death. The responsibility she felt was great, but also an honor that motivated her to move forward with courage. Inspired by the legacy, Emily began to plan something bigger, transforming her passion for serving into a welcoming space. She wanted no one to feel alone, excluded, or judged upon entering there, regardless of appearance, status, or age. The Horizon Cafe began to take shape in her mind, a place of inclusion and love, based on the principles Alexander had left. Each detail of the space reflected care, empathy, and a message that everyone deserves to be seen and valued. She thought about the moving stories of customers who would arrive there seeking comfort and belonging. Emily remembered herself, the time she felt invisible, and understood that each gesture of welcome could change lives. She imagined laughter, conversations, unexpected encounters, and moments of transformation happening daily in that space. The cafe wouldn't be just a business, but an extension of Alexander's love and legacy, transmitted at each table and to each person served. Emily felt an inner strength grow, realizing her life now had a purpose greater than she ever imagined. The young woman who began the journey with fear and insecurity now became a leader of a movement of hope and inclusion. Each corner of the Horizon Cafe would be a witness to real stories of overcoming, friendship, and true connection. She understood that the love she received could be multiplied, transforming the pain of loss into concrete action. And so, while planning the future, Emily knew she was fulfilling not just a dream, but Alexander's wish to live and do good. Each decision, each choice, and each smile shared became a reflection of what she'd learned with him. The legacy was complete. It wasn't just memory, but life, love, and inspiration that would continue to flourish through her. Months later, the Horizon Cafe opened its doors with vibrant, welcoming energy full of meaning. Emily, now more confident and secure, walked among tables, smiling at each customer as if sharing a secret of happiness. The aroma of fresh coffee mixed with a feeling of belonging that floated in the air. Each detail, From the carefully chosen cups to the pictures on the walls, reflected the dedication and love Alexander inspired in her. There was a special table reserved for lonely or discriminated people, a direct reminder of the promise made to him. Customers who before felt invisible now found a safe place where they could be heard and valued. Emily noticed in the looks and gestures of each one the impact that a simple act of welcome can have. She felt that the pain of loss was transforming into purpose, and each smile became a reward. The Horizon Cafe wasn't just a physical space, but an extension of Alexander's legacy, a place where love and hope met. Emily, many times, remembered the streets of Paris, Barcelona, Rome, and Santorini, realizing that each experience contributed to shaping that project. She understood that living fully involves transforming experiences, even painful ones, into actions that benefit others. Each day was an opportunity to perpetuate real stories of overcoming, acceptance, and unconditional love. The space became a meeting point for those seeking more than food or drink. They sought understanding and empathy. Emily felt fulfilled, knowing that the courage to accept the improbable led her to build something bigger than herself. And at that beginning, it became clear that Alexander's legacy not only survived, but flourished in each detail of the cafe. Customers arrived with shy or sad looks and left with light smiles, moved by finally feeling seen. Emily talked with each one, remembering her own journey and Alexander's words. Live and love intensely. She saw in the gestures of gratitude the concrete proof that love transforms lives and generates new paths. The Horizon Cafe wasn't just about coffee, but about encounters that healed invisible wounds. She encouraged each visitor to share their story, knowing that listening can be a powerful act of empathy. Emily felt inspired daily, seeing how the pain of exclusion could transform into opportunities for welcome. Each laugh, each conversation, and each exchange looked strengthened her mission to continue Alexander's legacy. The young woman who before felt invisible now became a catalyst for changes and inspiration for others. Moving and real stories emerged each day, bringing new perspectives and strengthening the support network created. She realized that, by embracing the pain of the past, she built a present full of meaning. The cafe became a symbol of hope, showing that even the most painful losses can generate beauty and purpose. Emily understood that the true legacy isn't just in what we receive, but in what we offer the world. Each person who passed through the Horizon Cafe carried with them a living memory of love, courage, and acceptance. She felt part of something bigger, where the impact of a well-lived life multiplied infinitely. And so, day after day, the cafe became a stage for transformation and connection, perpetuating Alexander's essence. Emily, at the end of each day, sat at the special table reserved for those who needed welcome, reflecting on everything she'd lived. She remembered the overweight waitress who once felt rejected and insecure, and smiled realizing the distance she'd traveled. Alexander's love continued guiding her decisions, reminding her to live with intensity and generosity. Each occupied table, each shared story, was a reminder that the courage to accept the improbable transforms lives. She understood that wealth isn't just in money, but in the positive impact we leave on the world. Emily felt proud to transform her pain into opportunity, her loss into learning, and her life into inspiration. The Horizon Cafe was more than a physical location. It was a symbol of love, resilience, and hope. Real stories of overcoming unexpected friendships and moments of connection happened every day there, strengthening her mission. She noticed that Alexander, although physically absent, continued present in each gesture, smile, and decision. Emily now understood that true love isn't measured by time, but by the depth and by the impact it leaves. She looked toward the future with confidence, knowing that each action carried a bit of Alexander's soul. The cafe became a beacon for those who felt invisible, offering human warmth and opportunity for belonging. Emily smiled, recognizing that the cycle initiated at the Bluebird Cafe transformed into something much bigger, eternal, and inspiring. And so, each workday became a celebration of life, love, and the courage to believe in the impossible. The Horizon Cafe remained as living proof that true love, though brief, can change a world. Now that you've heard this incredible story, ask yourself, how many times have you stopped living because of fear, shame, or insecurity? How many opportunities passed unnoticed simply because we don't believe we deserve to be happy or loved. Emily showed us that the courage to accept the improbable can transform lives, that an intense moment can generate an eternal legacy, and that true love goes beyond time and appearance. Think about who you could positively impact today, what dreams you still hesitate about, and what actions could change your life forever. And you, are you willing to take risks and live fully, even facing uncertainties? Remember, life doesn't wait and every second matters. If this story inspired you, imagine what you can learn by applying these principles in your own life. Start now to value each moment, embrace opportunities, and transform difficulties into strength. If you want to continue learning about stories that teach life lessons, about courage, overcoming, and love that transcends barriers, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss a chance to be inspired and grow with each story. And now, tell me, what was the lesson that touched you most in this story? Would you be willing to live intensely, even knowing time is short? Share in the comments and inspire other people too.